Welcome to Energy and Environment Weekly. I am Joycelyn Elakeche Ada. Our top stories: OPEC members and its allies, production cut slips as Gulf members led by Saudi Arabia end voluntary extra output cuts. Aviation fuel has the worst hit in the COVID-19 crisis and faces the most prolonged period of recovery compared to other fuels. Update on Nigeria Government Transportation Network Code. And on power, 1.2 billion naira released by the federal government to the Taraba state government to begin work on the 3,050 megawatts MAMBILLA hydroelectric power project. And on the international scene, Libya's port blockade envisaged to help clear the global oil supply glut, and ecological disaster created in Mauritius, endangering corals, fish, and other marine life around the Indian Ocean. All these and more after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome to Energy and Environment Weekly. Starting off, in the month of June, OPEC members and its allies' production cut slipped. This is as Gulf members led by Saudi Arabia ended their voluntary extra output cuts. According to a survey conducted by S&P Global Platts, some countries that have struggled to adhere to their quotas continue to pump above their caps. According to S&P, OPEC and its allies' output is set to rise even further in August, with the coalition hiking its quotas at about 2 million barrels per day in anticipation of higher global oil demand. It's assumed that some of the additional production may be offset by compensation cuts pledged by members that overproduced their quotas in May, June, and July. Some of these countries are Iraq, Nigeria, Angola, and Kazakhstan. Iraq says it will cut an extra 400,000 billion barrels per day below its quota in August and September, after missing its target yet again in July. Angola and Kazakhstan significantly improved their performance in the month of July. And meanwhile, Nigeria maintains that some of its production should be categorized as condensate, which is not subject to the quotas. OPEC's 13 countries produced 23.39 million barrels per day of crude in the month of July. And moving on, aviation fuel is set to have the worst hit in the COVID-19 crisis and faces the most prolonged period of recovery compared to other fuels such as gasoline and diesel. According to analysts, it will take another 2 years for a full recovery in jet fuel demand globally. This is because overall passenger traffic numbers continue to be low and mandatory quarantines continue to stop people from traveling on international flights. According to EIA estimates, using data from aviation company Serum, global demand for jet fuel for commercial passenger flights crashed an average of 4.3 million barrels per day in January, and for February to 1.0 million barrels in April. From May onwards, jet fuel demand started to slow creep out, but at a much slower pace than gasoline demand for road transportation. By the first 2 weeks of July, the consumption of jet fuel by commercial passenger flights had increased to an average of 1.6 million barrels per day. That's up from the 1 million barrels low in April. Still, the July 2020 demand was 69% less than the consumption of jet fuel for commercial flights in July 2019, according to estimates. Internationally, demand in China was down 43% year-on-year in June. Consumption was down significantly more in other markets, including down 75% in the US, down 80% in the rest of Asia Pacific, and down 87% in Europe. Let's take a look at OPEC members' oil prices for today. That's the oil prices for OPEC member countries for today. And moving on, the federal government has launched the Code for Nigeria Gas Transportation Network. This is in an effort to deepen the growth of gas market in the country. The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Chief Timothy Silva, said this administration's key policy is to enhance gas reserves growth to support domestic and export projects. He said other focus areas is to expand domestic gas supply and address the perennial challenges of gas flaring, which is attendant waste and environmental impact of gas flaring. According to Chief Silva, the aggregate impact hangs on three anchor programs on gas, namely the Nigerian Gas Transportation Network Code, National Gas Expansion Program, and Nigerian Gas Flare Commercialization Program. He said this would help the sector achieve the presidential mandate of gas penetration, gas-based industrialization, and economic diversification. According to the minister, the network code will open a pool of opportunities for investors interested in the gas subsector of the oil and gas industry. It will also ensure that only the right quality of gas goes through the pipeline, while guaranteeing gas pipeline integrity and give an understanding of metering. Speaking at the launch, Engineer Sarki Awalu, the Director, Department of Petroleum Resources, DPR, said the gas code will address several issues such as gas flaring. It will also grow infrastructure and expand utilization of gas in the country. We'll take a short break now, and when we come back, oil and gas stories from the international scene, as Libya's oil blockade will help clear the global supply glut. Stay with us. Welcome. If you're just joining us, this is E&E Weekly on ASU Television. On the international scene, there is hope that Libya's port blockade will help clear the global oil supply glut. The blockade is set to keep the North African country's oil off the market until at least the fourth quarter of 2020, which, as devastating as it will be for Libyan oil revenues, could help reduce the expected global production glut by 65%. Currently, oil production in Libya is around 100,000 barrels per day. This figure is dramatically down from 1.2 million barrels at the start of the year, just before paramilitary formations affiliated with the Libyan National Army, LNA, of Eastern Libyan strongman General Khalifa Haftar occupied Libya's oil export terminals and oil fields. With Libya's conflict escalating, the country's crude oil exports are expected to be just 1.2 million barrels in August, a 40% plunge from July. And with no immediate return of Libyan oil on the market, the expected global production surplus later this year could be just 58.6 million barrels, or about one-third of Restart Energy's previous forecast. Even if Libya resumes most of its production soon, Libya's 2020 exit production rate will be between 700,000 billion barrels per day and 800,000 billion barrels per day. The country, however, will need another 4 months to ramp the production up to 1 million barrels per day. The big oil forced to change the strategy after the oil price crash, what appears to be one of the most challenging quarters for the oil industry in recent memory. 5 big oils, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, BP, and Total, wrote down nearly 50 billion US dollars from the value of their oil and gas assets. This followed commodity prices crashed, and as some of them strategically reset their expectations of oil prices going forward. The 5 international oil majors also reduced capital expenditure plans as well as their oil and gas production as demand crashed in the second quarter due to the COVID-19 pandemic. All of them, apart from the notable exception of Exxon, recalibrated the value of their oil and gas assets in the second quarter due to the crash in oil prices and expectations of depressed demand for at least several more quarters. The second quarter saw some of the worst quarterly figures at big oil in decades, and while the overall impression was that of a dismal quarter, the majors responded in different ways to the crash in oil prices and demand. Across the Atlantic, European majors Shell and Total managed to avoid adjusted losses thanks to their near-oil trading businesses that cushioned the blow from the low oil prices. And moving on to the power sector. The sum of 1.2 billion naira has been released by the federal government to the Taraba state government to begin work on the 3,050 megawatts MAMBILLA hydroelectric power project. According to reports, the 2 trillion naira power project has been in the pipeline for over 40 years. The 1.2 billion naira released is for survey and the sensitization of different host communities occupying the site where the plant is to be constructed. It will be recalled that the Minister of Power, Engineer Salim Maman, visited Taraba State, where he met with Governor Darius Ishaku to discuss several issues bordering on the 3,050 megawatts project, among others. On his official Twitter handle, the minister revealed some of the highlights of the discussions held in Taraba. He tweeted that the federal government and Taraba State discussed on how to speed up the final takeoff of the MAMBILLA hydroelectric power project and other power issues affecting the state. He also directed the Rural Electrification Agency to execute several power projects in different parts of the state. The 3,050 megawatts MAMBILLA project has faced series of setbacks in the past, ranging from the occupants of the land to be used and to financial settlements. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, it's the environmental sector. Stay with us. This is Energy and Environment Weekly. We are moving on to the environmental sector. The federal government of Nigeria has pledged to support other ECOWAS member states in developing an appropriate mechanism to strengthen biodiversity laws. The Minister of Environment, Dr. Mohammed Mahmoud Abubakar, said Nigeria would provide the required support in ensuring continuous coordination of sub-regional consultations on biodiversity. He said he would also promote strong regional collaboration among member states to achieve post-2020 global biodiversity framework. The minister was speaking at a two-day webinar meeting with 15 countries of the Economic Commission of West Africa States, ECOWAS. He encouraged other member states to participate in Biodiversity Alliance, which would help in achieving the country's biodiversity targets. He revealed that the most areas suffering from biodiversity loss are West African countries. The minister mentioned deforestation across the sub-region as among the highest causes of biodiversity in the world, and also increased uncontrolled farmland expansion and illegal wildlife trade. He said lack of enforcement of laws on biodiversity and weak environmental awareness are causes of the daily threats witnessed on biodiversity. It will be recalled that in 2019, the federal government of Nigeria reviewed its national forest policy as a national framework to improve forest cover and support livelihood of people in the country. The minister said that this policy was a working tool for national biodiversity strategic action plans targeted at delivering biodiversity conservation goals. He added that forests and other ecosystems such as wetlands remained a significant pillar of support for biodiversity conservation, and there should be a concerted effort towards improving, protecting, and restoring all degraded ecosystem. And on the international scene, an ecological disaster has been created in Mauritius, endangering corals, fish, and other marine life around the Indian Ocean. They followed the spillage of more than 1,000 tons of fuel from Japanese bulk carrier that ran around on a reef in Mauritius. The MV Wakashio, owned by Nagasaki Shipping Company, struck the reef of Mauritius' southeast coast on July the 25th. The government stated that fuel was leaking from a crack in the vessel hull, and Prime Minister Pravin Kumar judged the declared a state of environmental emergency, pledging for international help.
On the advice of the company, on their experts, etc., without taking the best interest of the people of Mauritius and the best interest of what should be done to protect our country, our lagoon, from a potential, it was a potential spillage at that time, and this is gross negligence by government.
Mauritians are coming en masse to help us make the oil booms. These booms are taken by volunteer boats. The boatmen of Mahibuk have voluntarily put their boats at our disposal to go and place these oil booms at sea. Thanks to this, the booms are managing to retain the oil spilled from Waukesha.
Thousands of volunteers have come to help.
Greenpeace
Oil
said the
booms made
spill
from
was
sugarcane
likely
leaves
to be
are
one
being
of the
built to
worst
stop further spoiling of the
ecological
beaches.
crisis Mauritius has ever seen. Nagasaki Shipping Company said it had tried to free the tanker, but the effort was hampered by persistent bad weather. The tanker is grounded in what the Environment Ministry has described as a sensitive zone, with the leaking fuel endangering the diverse marine life that attracts tourists from around the world. Mauritius, famous for its pristine beaches, is popular with tourists who last year contributed 63 billion Mauritius rupees, that's $1.6 billion, to the economy. That's a very sad one for Mauritius, and hopefully the spillage would be cleared soon so as to save the lives of marine things in the water. And that's our package for E&E Weekly for today. Join us next week as we bring you a fresh episode of the program. And remember to watch this episode and previous episodes of the program on its YouTube page. Simply search for E&E Weekly and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. I am Joycelyn Elakeche Ada. Bye for now.